Or they don't, they like, "Ooh, these are good." And have like, have I lost
And
it? And I was like,
That. Oh.
You should do, yeah, the average of your, yeah. well-
Want to throw mine in there and it'll make you really old.
And mine too.
Shirley. Shirley. Shirley, are we ready? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Rapid City Area School Study Session. And Shirley, may we have a roll call, please?
Troy Carr.
Here.
Jamie Clapham.
Here.
Christine Stephenson.
Here.
Deb Baker.
Here.
Michael Berkland.
Here.
Walt Swan.
Here.
Kate Thomas.
Present.
All right, may we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, we have no persons wishing to address the school board, which means we have no board response to open forum. At this time, we're getting right to business. Items for discussion. All right, it's in the hands of Superintendent Swagger.
Thank you, President Carr. And the board, we are here tonight to continue our work on our strategic plan that we worked on and created last spring. We have spent this year really focusing in on work to create scorecards. It's that work that we are planning on sharing with you. Casey is here with us tonight. She has helped significantly with this work, and we have a PowerPoint we would like to share with you. Am I able to share my screen, Bobby? Okay. I think we're good. So in this work today, we are we are taking a look at our strategic plan and the hard work that we've been doing as a district. Obviously, there's a lot to cover, and a study session really needs to focus in on some direct areas. But we've been working very hard on our strategic plan and our leader stance, so we're going to share that work with you tonight. We are going to address our scorecard, the why, the what, and the how of that, the actual scorecards that we have created. And then we're going to recommend the cadence of how we will bring the board updates on this scorecard work. Bringing you back to the strategic plan and the pillars and the goal statements. These are the 5 strategic plan pillars that we developed as a community last year. This was not a top-down initiative. We brought in a steering committee with a lot of people involved in this process. We're very thankful for the work that was done. The 5 pillars that we determined were students, and that pillar champion is Dr. Strasser, Jen Strong, and Dr. Valerie Seals. They've been working diligently on that pillar. RCAS staff, Human Resource Director Gary Manuel has been the pillar champion and his team of that work. I, along with Kelsey and Bobby, have been the community pillar champions. Facilities work has been led by Coy and Jade and a team that has done some incredible work. And then the communication pillar has been worked on by Bobby and Director Shane Daniel.
All right. Well, first, let me say thank you for the opportunity to continue working alongside and partnering with Rapid City Area School District. We are thrilled tonight to bring forward to you all of the deep work that has been happening. The team here is really extraordinary in their ability to align efforts, to stay focused, to really dig deep on what we're going to bring you tonight in terms of the metrics that matter most as it aligns to your strategic plan here in Rapid City Area Schools. And so just to make the connection between the work that we've been doing around the strategic plan and the scorecard and the leadership development that's been happening across the district, we wanted to make this connection to the Student Education 9 principles as it relates to our work together, and then specifically this evening. And so as a team of leaders, you as the board and your district direction leaders, those pillar champions that Superintendent Swigert talked about, really tonight in our work around the scorecard, we're committing to excellence as leaders. We are measuring the important things. We are working to be accountable both as individuals and as a team of leaders. We're aligning our behaviors with those goals and values and really using tonight as an opportunity to communicate at all levels around this alignment of the scorecard and the important metrics associated.
I'm positive these all look incredibly familiar because I gave you a book, right?
In fact, every chapter of that book
Yeah.
might be one of those principles. So, and this, I'll share with you as a board, this is a really common connection that we make during the beginning of every one of our leadership development opportunities to really see that through line of the skills, the tactics, the actions that we're undertaking, and how do those align to really that complete vision of all of the pieces of leadership that involve both strategy and cultural work intentionally in an organization. And so when Superintendent Swigert and I were planning in terms of making some connections for you as a board, for your district level leadership, really this idea of your commitment to deep listening and feedback loops with your community became really apparent. And one of the pieces that we wanted to just make a connection around is this idea of what we're going to share with you tonight called leader stance. And so as leaders and board members in your organization and in the community that have really committed to building strength in your people, you've been listening deeply to their experiences, communicating around individuals' well-being, listening and hearing from them, recognizing successes, working on opportunities to develop, and then of course with the work around the strategic plan, challenging folks to achieve beyond even what we might conceive possible as individuals in our system. And in that process, you're receiving a lot of information and hearing from a lot of people. And one of the connections and pieces that we've worked on as a leadership team here in the district is, again, this idea of leader stance. And so we're offering this to you tonight as a piece of development connected to your commitment to deeply listening to the experiences of folks in Rapid City Area Schools. And this was something that we worked through a couple of weeks ago with leaders across the district as they received their employee experience survey results and really talked about this idea of when we receive feedback well, it doesn't mean that we act on every piece of feedback. But what it does mean is we're very thoughtful about what we're learning, how we might use that information to help us make the best decisions for our organization, and how those decisions might align to support the work that you've done around the strategic plan here in Rapid City Area Schools. And so what we've been doing as a district team is really thinking about in the moment when we're engaging with members of our community and hearing feedback from them and deeply listening, there's some tactics that the team here have been working to develop in our own leadership. So these two ideas in terms of, we're not debating the data, we're really here to listen and to probe and to listen some more to really understand what folks are feeling, experiencing, what their lived experiences essentially in Rapid City area schools. We've been working to ask those open-ended questions as leaders. Those might be probing to ask, and what else might be related to your experience? It might be a simple statement of, can you please tell me more about that? I'm really interested for you to say some more. And one that we've been talking a lot about as we've been gaining feedback, what would better look like? As a leadership team, we've done commitments to allowing silence in the space and knowing it's about hearing from others, creating opportunities for everyone to participate, and also using those in the moment feedback opportunities really to pause and to not agree to do anything in the moment until we're sure that we can accomplish it for the team.
So when Casey talks about leadership stance and the work that we're doing as district leaders, we really focused on this last week when we had the principals in the week before, and we looked at their employee experience survey results. We are continuing that work this week as each of the principals have a survey partner, and we're going out and talking about that leadership stance as they take their survey results back to their building and show our action steps of how we as a district in our buildings and in our work, we are going to respond to what we saw in those survey results and make improvement. So this week I will be meeting with 5 principals. I'm their survey partner, so I'm going in there. We are looking at the survey information. The principals received their numerical data on the day we met. We are going over the comments together and making a plan for them to take it back to their team. Why is that important? As you see, when the scorecards come up later, many of our determining factors on our scorecard anchor back to those surveys. Because the surveys are something we can guarantee are going to be the same year after year. So the questions are going to be the same. We are teaching our leaders how to take that information and go back to their buildings, respond to that, learn how to grow with that. When we talk about those open-ended questions, we'll see that some of the survey topics are about communication, and we hear a lot. I know the board has heard it as well. We need to communicate better. So as I've been meeting with principals this week, I've been talking to them about please go back to your staff and find out what better communication looks like to them. And then find out what that better communication would literally look like. Now, you might have 15 examples of better communication. That staff building needs to determine what is one they can all get on board with, one better way to communicate. And then they're going to communicate those up as action steps. So we as a district can get better at communicating in ways that people want communication. We've talked a lot about all the ways that we do communicate, but it doesn't always resonate or reach the right people. I might send something out in my Friday wrap up, which last week was Saturday. We might send something out in announcements like the board briefs or other things that Bobby sends out. Dr. Strasser sends out information. Bobby will send out things to all staff. Sometimes I have things that go out. Principals communicate with their staff. But if we are doing it in a way that they're electing not to have work for them, we need to know how to better do that. I know that I myself have put things in my Friday wrap up and that doesn't resonate with everybody, and I understand that. But then when people say, I didn't know, other people are saying, well, it was in the wrap up. So we need to get better at that. So that would be an example of what would better look like. We need to ask that question and we need to listen.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. So What we thought we might also share with you this evening, because we know you've been engaged and will likely continue to engage in some feedback and deep listening sessions with the community. What might it look like after the event to sort of process all of the information and learning that you hear, right? So you might start with, well, what wins were shared? Did we learn anything about what's working well in Rapid City area schools? And I'm sure you're harvesting lots of wins in those opportunities to hear from your community. What did we learn that we want to make sure continues because it's making a positive difference for those in our organization? Am I hearing ideas and themes that are repeated, or am I hearing isolated comments that are maybe not true for a large number of folks that are sharing their experiences? That opportunity to pause and reflect and consider how big are the themes or pockets of information. Is there anything that surprised me in what I learned or what I heard? And how might I learn more if that was something I was not familiar with? How does that learning align with our strategic plan priorities? And if I learned something there that we want to advance and it aligns, which district leader would be connected most directly to that work? And then finally, what would it look like then to support that work from the board table? And so we offer all of that to you because as we go through this strategic plan process and share with you the scorecards, there's lots of pieces of input and feedback that are part of that process. And the blessing of a strategic plan is that it creates guardrails for us. It's also the challenge that we have in terms of other ideas and things that folks may want to advance as connected to the organization. You as board members, along with executive leaders, get to use that strategic plan as guardrails. So sometimes that means that very good ideas might not be priorities for right now because they're not, you don't see them aligned to advancing your most important goals as related to your strategic plan.
So tonight we invited our district leaders to join us in the study session. Oftentimes they're on Zoom because our boardroom gets very crowded, but they are in person here tonight. So when you look at, question number 4, where it says, which district leader advances the work? I want you to picture these folks over here when those things come up, and I want you to really, as board members, be asking as a board, who of those lovely people do we put this work on? Who do we ask to lead this work? You guys have a lot on your plate. This is, kind of an extra duty you have assigned yourself. But as far as who gets the work done in the district, you're looking at us. And then asking yourself, how do we support the board work? We're trying to develop a common vocabulary across leadership in the district. And I wanted the board to have that vocabulary as well when it comes to that leadership stance piece.
Wonderful.
So we love this slide, right? We've been talking about this a lot. It comes in and up to the top often. We all know that the district, every single individual who works in this district wants acts of improvement. Every single person is working toward improving the school district. And we started on the far left side, everybody going in different directions. This strategic plan is beginning to pull us all into the same direction to aligned acts of improvement. We're going to take it a step further. We are moving from this to this. We are getting everybody in the boat rowing the same way.
Yeah, wonderful. So just additional examples to kind of have pictures in our mind of how that work is guiding us and helping us achieve those really important goals. And so where we're going tonight to share with you is really the work of what we might call a line of sight. So moving from those strategic plan pillars to the district scorecard, the metrics that the skilled team of leaders here in Rapid City area schools will present to you tonight for the metrics that they believe based on their skilled and their skill and expertise in the organization that will matter most for you as a district to understand how you're progressing on those strategic plan goals. That work will then quickly start to cascade into schools and other departments, right? To Nicole's point, it's everyone rowing in that same direction. And then that cascade continues into individual teachers, members of your classified team, and ultimately down into individual classrooms, departments, work sites to impact the experience and the growth and achievement of individual students. You will notice that arrow is double-sided. And so that's an additional feedback loop for us as a team as we continue this work, is understanding the impact of those goals and using that information to help us make adjustments quickly as we move through this process. All right. So to just quickly re-ground us, and as Nicole said, establish that idea of a scorecard, we'll share with you why we use it, right? It's been a while since we've talked about this. And so just to be able to have a chance to re-ground in the learning around that, we really use a scorecard as an improvement tool that's aligned to each one of your strategic plan pillars. You're going to see tonight, as the executive leaders share with you, you're going to have some very focused measures on each one of those pillars that will matter most for your understanding of success of the strategic plan here in Rapid City. The scorecard process that you'll see tonight and the cadence of those updates allows us to do two things pretty quickly. It's going to help us identify where we are seeing positive movement to understand what's making the greatest difference there so we can scale and spread that, but also quickly to identify where our intended actions are not moving the needle on those metrics. And so we can adjust at multiple points throughout the year so that think about them as wellness checks versus an autopsy of our data at the end of the year. The scorecard creates an opportunity for us to pause and both celebrate wins and quickly identify where things are not moving as intended. Go ahead. Do you want to speak to this one, Nicole?
Yeah, so we're a big district and we have lots of data points that we could measure. But just because you can measure everything doesn't mean you should. And when you try to do too much, you often don't get anything accomplished. So we have been very strategic in determining what we think is the best pieces of data measurement that we can bring to the board to show support in our strategic plan. And we're gonna have each group look at this. The development process was significant. And I know that Bishop Carr and I have talked numerous times this year, like, where is this at? Where is it coming? Let's get it here. So we have looked at everything that we possibly could use as measurement, and that was too much. So we really had to refine that and bring it down and determine what mattered most. And even then, our span was too large. So we have spent significant time figuring out what we could measure, figuring out what mattered most, and then tightening that down to the metrics that matter most. So the measurements that we can bring to the board that will actually illustrate something that you can see, understand, and move us forward on.
Yep.
So just to kind of paint a picture of where we have been, this is where we started with the community pillar. And that pillar talks about building collaborative relationships that support and improve the educational experience. This was our first list of all the things that we could measure: surveys, partnerships, partners, support for the bond, expansion opportunities, connecting with secondary education, connecting with employers, liaisoning with agencies, building opportunities for staff and students, sponsorships, job shadow, co-ops, alternative completion pathways, AP, dual enrollment. All of that we can measure, but is it what matters? So then we went on and this was like attempt 2. So then we were like, well, the family and caregiver survey, the employee experience survey. Did we want to look at financial? Are we growing in dollars coming into the building through partnerships? Is it goods and services? Is it our number of volunteers? Is it our platforms, our stats on how we communicate? Because we can pull stuff off of even YouTube. It's really kind of fascinating. College and career readiness. How many students are visiting the student centers, middle and elementary opportunities? What can we do to get the board involved? We had so many things. Those all matter, but what mattered most?
Yeah.
So we are going to take you through our process tonight. We're removing all of this stuff, the extra stuff, and we are really getting into the meat of our work.
Yeah, well said. Those were snips of work documents that we had. We wanted you to see a peek into what that has looked like in terms of the winnowing process as it relates to those pieces. And so what you are going to see very shortly, in fact, momentarily here, is each of the pillars on your strategic plan. You're going to see the scorecard for that as it exists today on March 12th. You'll see for each of those, the pillar, Nicole showed you those 5. We'll keep that language consistent. You will see the metrics, how the team is advancing and measuring the success of that pillar statement, the baseline, and that's where we'll stop this evening. The next work the team is engaging in is the annual goal setting and then the work on the 5-year goal of that plan. But we wanted to bring to you tonight those metrics as it stands today in Rapid City area schools as it relates to those scorecard pillar pieces. As you start to look at those, we also want to ground you in the idea of a district level scorecard is that this really should fit on one page for you. It might be the front and back of one page, okay, which you'll see. That's what you're going to get.
You're going to
when
get a
we're done.
front and front because
Right.
that's how we copied it, but yes.
But it should live on one page of all of the thousands of metrics that we could measure. Your skilled team of leaders here in Rapid City area schools bringing forward to you. These are the metrics that if we were to create short cycle action plans and work with our team and cascade those goals from the boardroom to the classroom, to individuals executing their work in departments and other places around the organization. If we were to move the needle there in those areas, it would advance the strategic plan priorities. So what you will see tonight really builds from the bottom, individual students, success, growth and achievement, individual members of your team in classified areas of the organization, to what that might roll up to within a classroom or a department. But ultimately, on a district level scorecard, you're going to see those numbers roll up as a whole district representation. There are a couple areas because of the type of metric that we use, and I'm sure Dr. Strasser and his team will talk about that. You'll see a few areas where it's banded by level because the metric is different. But for the most part, what you're going to see is a high level district understanding of what that metric is. The confidence that I know you have in your leaders is their knowledge of everything that builds underneath that. Right? And that's that cascade and those next pieces of the work. So I'm going to back up for 1 second.
Jade, you can get up. We're gonna start tonight with facilities. What I want to really push home right now is that this work is living at the level of the workers and the teachers and the students and coming up so that what we report to you is this scorecard, but it all resonates at the classroom level, the worker level, moving up. We're starting with facilities tonight because Jade and his team, Coy, who's home tonight, they have been so very, very strong in this work. And you have seen that work presented to you already. So a couple weeks ago, they came forward. We talked about the facilities. That work is what you're going to see in their scorecard. So I'm going to turn the scorecard discussion over to Jade, and if Coy joined us on Zoom, he might pop in too.
All right. All right, so I'll try to keep mine fairly short. Like Nicole said, we talked about this for about 2 hours a couple weeks ago, so I won't go too into the weeds on it. But the first thing we wanted to do was develop some safe, modern, effective learning environment standards. And the best way to do that was to establish entire facility standards. If you recall from the last study session with that tiered list of all the schools, we currently sit at an average of 53. Moving on from there, we wanted to talk about building and maintaining facilities to meet the changing educational needs. And that all starts with developing a 10-year plan for our facilities. So while we haven't gone through that in detail, I do want to point out this year, in particular, 2022-2023 school year, we will be completing 74 projects for a total of $6.7 million, not $6.70, for $6.7 million. So just I guess show the dollar amount that it takes to move the needle up, even sitting at a 53 score right now. Spending almost $7 million on our facilities doesn't move it a ton. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail on the next meeting, I think.
So really super important things here is we know where they're actually kind of ahead of us. They know where they're going. So the goal for them is going to be an increase of
1.5.
1.5 average a year, 1.5. And we believe that spending with our current capital outlay allocations, that is what we can do. We can move that average 1.5 a year. We've also talked about the number of projects that are currently happening and the number of projects that are being requested and happening in the future, being very cognizant of all of the things, and we've talked about this in great detail, but all of the things capital outlay buys for the district. Because as much as we want it to be just for facilities, that is not reality. It is our curriculum. There's a lot of things that come out of capital outlay. So Jade, you said 22-23, is this year, like 23-24? Or is this last year?
This is 22-23 or
Okay.
23-24. I am sorry. I got
Okay,
that
I
mixed
just
up.
wanna make sure because I believed it was this year. So
Yeah,
this
it
is, excuse me, this year, 23-24, they were approved in the spring of 23. That's
Yep.
kind of where that gets confusing because we've talked about how this time of year, we're living in 2 school years. Feels like we have half a foot in 23, 24, and half a foot in 24, 25. So what projects we're going to work on in 24, 25 are being determined right now. So last year at this time, we picked these 74 projects and we allocated $6.7 million of our capital outlay on those projects. And we believe that that is going to move us 1.5 on that average. Did I say that?
Yes, that's perfect. Yep.
Any questions for Jade?
Stephenson.
Is 1.5 reasonable given the capital outlay transfers that we're likely gonna have to do? Or would that have to be readjusted?
Yeah, I think given our budget, I think 1.5 is totally appropriate. I mean, I think there's gonna be years when we're gonna move 0.5. I think there's gonna be years where we move 4. And it really varies based on which items we're checking off the list on that metric. I mean, there's some items that will bring the average score or the overall score of a building up 10 points. There's some that only bring it up 1. I mean, a great example is in the near future, we're going to have to upgrade the lighting at Central High School. Our initial estimates for the first phase is about $2 million. That only counts for 1 point. So large amounts of money don't necessarily mean large amounts of movement. It really depends on where we put that money.
Also, this can be greatly affected by grants that we are actively applying for. So for instance, Stevens High School received a grant for $60,000 to a safety grant to look at how our doors are locked there. So that door lock is a school safety issue. It is part of the score. It will move Stevens on the
Quite a
rating
bit.
scale for a cost of $60,000, which none of it is coming out of the district. We are applying for some other larger grants. All of that, safety wise and other ways, can impact that movement without a cost to the district. But in reality, most movement is going to come from what we can expend from capital outlay on facilities.
And so follow up, does this then becomes a guide where like you say, well, we could spend $500,000 here and get us a point, or $700,000 here and get us a half a point, and it helps in the decision-making process?
Yes and no. I think there are, one of the first things we have to do is weigh what is most important. At the end of the day, we have to look at safety and security, and then the functionality of the building. And, you know, we have to address our needs first, and then we can compare kind of what that does to the average score of the building. But I don't think we let the score drive what projects we pick. But I think kind of help reinforce the work that we're doing. I think that's what it's better at.
Bishop Carcoy does have his hand up.
My good friend from the great state of South Dakota, Mr. Sassy.
Thank you very much, President Carr. And good evening, board members. I'm sorry. I know I'm difficult to hear well right now. I had a nasty case of the flu over the weekend, and apparently it decided to target my voice box in particular. So sorry I couldn't be there with you, Jade. You did a fantastic job of handling that. Just a couple quick things to highlight. I think one of the nice things that Jade highlighted here was the amount of money going into current capital outlay projects. And I think that's an overlooked piece oftentimes when we are communicating with our community in regard to how we invest in our buildings. There is a huge amount of resources every single year going into our buildings. And keep in mind, those are only direct building projects. That doesn't consider the amount of debt service that the capital outlay is servicing on a yearly basis that also went directly into building projects in one form or another. So I wanted to highlight that. I think that is often a missing link in that conversation. Secondly, I think Jay did a really nice job of explaining that. And as you start to drill into these pillars and you see the information and the criteria and the weighting the work that Jade and our group did around those very important areas of what constitutes a safe and effective learning environment. Sort of to your question, Christine, I don't think that it necessarily dictates the projects selected, but I think that the projects that are addressing the highest criteria areas in the highest weighted areas are naturally going to rise to the surface, which is, in my opinion, exactly what we'd want to see through this process, because those are the most important areas we could be addressing. So to me, what we're really trying to do is really drive a link between capital outlay resources and driving them to what are the most effective projects that we can be doing with that money. And then lastly, Christine, you asked about capital outlay transfers. So in doing this work, I've taken into consideration an average capital outlay transfer over the past decade and figured that into the amount of resources that we would be able to flow into those projects on a yearly basis. So if we had years where the capital outlay transfer was lighter than anticipated, or we got away from it completely, that would mean that we could flow more resources into the facility side, and again, make that average score move faster. So just wanted to quickly touch on those things.
Thank you, Mr. Sassen. Any other
Yes, sir.
questions?
Thank you.
I think too, for Jade and Mr. Sassen, for the facilities committee, it would do the board a great favor and the community. Mr. Sassen, there I saw a list when I first got on the board of all the projects that principals had wanted and what their priorities were and what you wanted to work on. It would really be nice for the community to hear what we're doing with what we have. And I don't think we get to hear, it's done, but we don't get a report and get to hear the work that, Jay, that you're doing to keep up what we're having. So either through the facilities report or through Mr. Sasse, your report, that would be good to have that information.
Thank you, Jade.
Yep.
Well done. So I'm gonna share, I'll ground you with one more piece that I think is really important. We specifically picked facilities because you've seen the level of detail that exists underneath, right? So thinking about as a board, those would be those high level district metrics. The same model is going to flow into the 4 remaining pillars. You may or may not have received that close look at some of the other work underneath it, but the same theory applies. So we picked facilities particularly because you had seen that build of that district number, and I just wanted to reground us in that as we start into the student pillar.
Good evening, board. As you can see, Dr. Seals, Director Strong, and I have been working on the student pillar and trying to really bring together the metrics that matter. I think when it was mentioned earlier, how you can go anywhere and everywhere with metrics, I feel like that was specifically targeted to us, even though I didn't do the work in the other areas. But man, we were all over the place. And even just a couple of weeks ago, I think we changed our metrics significantly. So even though I do think when you look at what we have up here, seems probably fairly simple, it was not simple to get to. So I think that this is the most important, and I think my colleagues would agree. So our first approach was we broke down the pillar description, and we tried to identify those words like welcome, acknowledge, value, safe, educated, prepared, and so forth, and say, what does that really speak to us in terms of the metrics and what this looks like? So we had a lot of great discussions around that. And the first thing that you see up there is the student survey. And the student survey says TBD, so it's not put together yet. That is something that we're going to work on over the next couple months here. I know that we've had conversations with Casey about utilizing some surveys that they've done with students. And we want to draw on that, not necessarily use it, but draw on what they've done before. And our focus is on, kind of the environment and the value that kids feel in our schools. And this is where, you can look at it as culture, as climate. Those are probably more of the words we're familiar with. But that's how we broke down trying to figure out what we wanted to see. And the student survey, we felt rose to the top and something that we want to do annually for our students. The second thing up there is the attendance rate. And when you look at the attendance rate, we know that kids don't learn when they're not present in the learning environment. And we have different ways of utilizing the learning environment, but yet kids need to be present there. So we chose this and we thought it made sense to follow the state calculation. So for our district this year, it was 81% of our students were in school 90% at the rate of 90%. So we want to follow that calculation. And I think that would give us some good data. Our goal will be around a 2% increase per year. And when you think about that, if I can put that into perspective, over the last 5 years, we've gone down almost 10%. So if we fashion this out over 5 years at 2% growth, and if we're fortunate enough to meet or exceed that, we'll be back into the 90 plus percentile, which is tremendous when you think of all the learning that occurs or can be occurring because of that. The third thing we looked at and chose was our behavior referrals. We know that is always going to be a concern. We landed on the number of major referrals, and we felt that was a good way to say, hey, look, this is kind of our number, and we projected our number based on our current, we projected out for the end of the year based on our current number as of today, and that's where you get the 5378. So again, that's a projection in this year. With that focus on major referrals, those are the ones that result in significant consequences, such as your in schools detention, your out of school detentions, or excuse me, suspensions. And we thought that was a good district baseline because it allows our schools, individual buildings, to take that and really drill down. And I know they look at it and they work on it, and they do that work with kids to help them understand how best to learn and be in that learning environment day to day. So that's how we've looked at the behavior piece for major behavior referrals. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues here and kind of let them bring home the learning growth piece before we take any questions.
I'm not as tall as Dr. Strasser, so I gotta adjust. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm going to address the learning growth for math and ELA. As part of our student pillar, not only our student pillar discusses the culture and the climate of the school, of the students, having them in school, they're attending school, but what they do while they're at school. So we wrote an ELA goal and a math goal, growth goal for our students for all of our students K-12, and we use 3 different metrics. For our K-1 students, the metrics that we will use will be our Acadians. And our baseline data right now, you can see is a 48% of our students met projected growth in their Acadians on their math, and 46.5 met projected growth in ELA. Then we see grades 2 through 8 met projected growth on their MAP scores, 52% and 50 math and ELA respectively. So we chose to write a growth goal instead of a proficiency goal. And here's why. We know that the latest research shows that if you set a proficiency goal target, let's say 80%, that you will have 75% of your students fail that 80% proficiency. Personally, as a student, when I was in elementary school and even high school, I would have never scored proficient in math. I wouldn't have. I would have never been proficient according to these magic numbers in math. However, I grew every year. I'm a fairly intelligent person, I think. I've done pretty well for myself. So marking and labeling our students as proficient and non-proficient can actually have more detriment to them, their teachers and their schools than just meeting growth. So projected growth on the Acadians is this wonderful diamond that shows based on the trajectory of how your child is learning and what they're being delivered in class. Here's what we are expecting their growth to be from beginning, middle, and end. And if they meet that projected growth, they're actually on target to do well. Some will eventually meet proficiency, some won't, some are already at proficiency, some aren't. However, the projected growth is an indicator to say they are making significant gains towards the end means. So it's not just you made it, you didn't make it. We have some of our schools, bless their hearts, that will never be 80% proficient in math and ELA. They just won't. But they are making significant growth gains in their projected growth. And it gives them an opportunity to celebrate and their students an opportunity to celebrate. And what we're seeing is there's a momentum building, knowing that they're meeting their projected growth. They're starting to grow more and more and more. So what we know from the latest research, the projected growth and growth goals are much more impactful because it's a living goal instead of a stagnant goal with our buildings and our teachers. Then our final two measurements are the pre-SAT and ACT, especially since we know that we will be moving away from SBAC and moving towards the ACT at the high school. What we would like to do for our 5-year goal, 1-year goal and 5-year goal is increase those percentages by 2% every year for the next 5 years. And then our pre-ACT and our ACT, increase those by 0.5 every year for the next 5 years. Right now, the state average for the 11th grade ACT is 21.1. So if we could meet that over the course of the next 2 years and either maintain and exceed that, we want to be the school that everyone comes to and looks to because we are the best of the best. Then to take this a step further, what we're doing on our school improvement plans in the schools is each one of our schools are writing an ELA goal, a math goal, and a non-academic goal, which aligns to the attendance, the behavior, the family and community engagement, one of those couple of pieces to support our students. And each building has a goal, a 1-year goal and a 3-year goal. Here's how this looks in 1 year. Here's how this looks in 3 years. They're using the same language that you see right here on our district goal. And then next fall, when the teachers reconvene and the staff reconvenes, each grade level will write a grade goal that aligns to the school goal, which aligns to the district goal. And then each teacher will write a goal that aligns to the grade goal. So this really drills down to each classroom, moving this needle, doing what's best for kids, doing what's best for our district, and helping those students really achieve and hopefully exceed our expectations. Any questions?
Stephenson.
Thank you. I can completely imagine how choosing data would be really hard in your area. So I appreciate the complication. And I also appreciate your explanation of growth versus scores. That's good to know and helpful as a framework. My question is, and if I have two, but one, can you help me understand how you reason to not put in high school completion rates? Would that fall under here? Does that?
So the high school completion rates where we are looking at, for instance, students can't complete if they're not in school. So if the attendance increases and the behavior referrals decrease, research shows by attrition that completion will increase. So if they don't even complete ninth grade, if their attendance is low and they stop coming, they're not even going to graduate. So these, we can't, if we measure everything and everything is important, nothing is important. So we chose the indicators that would be most representative and indicative to get to the completion rate, that they feel successful, that they are meeting proficiency, that they are coming to school, that they feel safety and belonging, that our behavioral referrals decrease, that all of those funnel to that end goal, but that we can't get to that end goal unless we address these first. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Okay.
appreciate that. And then my second question is, I know many other members of the board are pretty concerned about the achievement gap between our native kids and our non-native kids. Some of this, you could get growth by helping those at the top grow even more, or the highest achievers, or you could get growth. Is there a way that, and I guess this might be a question for you, is there a way that we can incorporate that? If it's the will of the whole board, it seems like it has been in the past, and I don't know if it is now, but if that's one of our priorities, can that be incorporated?
So the reason why we wrote the growth goal the way they did is so that each individual school can tailor their growth goal to the student's needs. And if there's a larger achievement gap in that school based on a demographic or based on attendance or whatever it is, whatever the subgroup is, they can write their goal specific to meet that need. Because the growth goal at Stevens is going to look different than the growth goal at General Beetle. And it should. However, everybody still grows. Everybody still grows towards that proficiency and towards that target. So the reason why this is written so obtusely is so that everybody can differentiate and target their specific needs in their specific buildings in their specific ways. So it might be however it needs to look, whether it's demographics or whether it's age or whatever it is, but they have the opportunity to differentiate their professional development to meet the specific needs of those students who require the most intervention.
And also, sorry, I can't raise my hand because I'm sharing my screen. I would go into, take it a step further. Stevens and Central may choose in their goal to address graduation rate. Various buildings may choose to address what they feel is the learning gap. This is the broad umbrella district goal, but we are working super hard, thanks to these folks over here, of taking this work to the building level down into the classroom level. For the first time ever, we're going to ask our teachers next fall to look at this and write a goal that connects directly to our strategic plan. They themselves, their students, their building, directly attaching it to our strategic plan. So it's living there. And that work that they are doing is going to cascade up here, where we can show you as at the board level.
Is that it? This is Clapham.
I just wanna, I really appreciate, like Ms. Stevenson said, I really appreciate the growth, the explanation of the growth. I learned a lot as a parent of growth versus proficiency. And I think it's important because I think it avoids those people that are kind of at the top, just hanging out stagnantly at the top because, well, we're already at proficient, so what does it matter kind of thing. I do wonder, I guess my question would be, I absolutely understand growth. I absolutely understand, like, we have schools with very varying needs. I just wonder about, I guess, the language and saying we have a school that will never, like, I just worry about that, like, thought process of this school will never reach proficiency. Is that like, and how I don't think the scorecard necessarily says that. I just wonder when we look, and obviously there's places that have a significantly more growth than other places do. So I guess as leadership, like, what is that, like, in conversations, what does that look like when we go building to building and how does that?
That's a great question, Mrs. Clapham. So again, what the research says is that growth goals are more impactful on student growth because of the fluidity of the language. What the growth goal doesn't say specifically is you'll never be proficient. What it says is everybody grows. Just as you said, the top grows, the bottom grows. And so it really is a differentiation and reframing the accountability. How does it look to hold everybody accountable to growing to the best of their ability? And how does it hold every teacher accountable to holding every student accountable to growing? So if you have a high performing school, your students still grow and you're still accountable for the growth of your students. So that this is reshifting the mindset instead of saying you can or you won't, but it's everybody will. So it's really shifting that conversation and holding everybody accountable to everybody growing.
And it can't happen overnight. I mean, like growth can happen, but reaching proficiency isn't going to miraculously happen tomorrow in every single classroom. What I really, really love about the work that they have done is it takes, in my mind, it takes the idea that not all schools are doing this work, are able to reach. Nobody can give up on these goals, right? Because everybody is reflected in this work, everybody. So when we have in the past, like really looked at proficiency, I believe that some possibility that some people might have thought at some point during the year, like, we're not gonna reach it by this day, you know, and it might have felt like we were creating a mountain they couldn't climb. But this creates a path that everybody can walk down. And so we're taking away this idea that anybody can judge us in Rapid area schools by one standard of proficiency, which is a line that somebody has created. And it goes back to where is the progress being made? And it's so essential because like Jen, I've told you guys my story. I didn't think I was going to graduate from high school. I couldn't read well at all. I would have been the child. They were like, well, she's not gonna be proficient. And yet it was something entirely unrelated to my teachers, right? It was my eyes. So here we go. This is something everybody can get behind. I believe our community can get behind the attendance piece. I believe our community can get behind the behavior piece. I believe every single staff member and student can get behind the growth piece.
Mr. Swan.
Thank you, President Carr. Good to see everyone here tonight. Really is. Dr. Strasser, how are you? It's good to see you. I haven't heard you, I heard you more than 3 words tonight. So I'm quite impressed. I would like to speak about 2 things and then I'll shut up, but the major behavior referrals, I see the approximation and I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's a high number. And I get it. We're gonna chunk it off into something we're not gonna take that big bite and say we're gonna eliminate it all. We're gonna do things to reduce it. And I'm really glad to see that you're addressing that goal because that was one of the things that we had heard from in recruitment and retention that there is and it wasn't just one specific building or wasn't one specific group of people. It was everybody saying we have behaviors. And that's the one thing that they really would like to see addressed. And that's that leads me to my second train of thought, which is, you know, one of the things that we heard and quite clearly and loudly, I guess, at these listening sessions that we had was that, you know, they talk about what happens with the data. You know, we get the data, we get it, and all of a sudden they assign us PD and it has nothing to do with what we're doing. You know what I mean? And that was one of the things they had talked about, differentiating PD, not only for the teachers, but also the paras, so that it was talked about and that they had received the same training twice, you know, and at these, I wish I had my notes because there were some great quotes. And this really, I think, is going to build momentum in creating that we can reach a goal, you know, and we're not trying to bite it all off and get that gain. 1 year and then we lose focus and then we have to refocus. This keeps us focused year to year. So thank you very much for your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Was that a question? I can't remember. It was a statement. Okay, all right, Mr. Berkeley.
Thank you. I also have statements. Couple of them. First off, wanted to do some math as I do. When I see that 5,378 number, it is a big number, but when you break that down, it's about 1 per school per day. So that is still a lot. Don't get me wrong. I definitely hear that in our community, but sometimes when I hear about these behavior issues, I feel like I'm gonna walk into a school and it's just like a zoo. I've been to quite a few schools and it's 1 per school per day on average. It's not good. It's not, I'm not saying we're good here, but I did just want to break that big number down into a smaller number. And I also wanted to say thank you for addressing the growth and add a little bit more into that. I guess the kind of will never question I would say is will never without like major societal changes that we don't have any control over. Like when kids are entering school 2-3 years behind already, that's gonna take a lot more than we can ever do. And just another personal example of that, many of my students were at a elementary school level. So kind of as Superintendent Swigert was talking about, if you ask me to get all of my students up to proficient, I'm gonna look like a really, really, really terrible teacher. Because about 20% maybe entered my class at 10th grade or at 9th grade level. And so to get them to 10th grade level, probably only about 30% if I did really well are gonna get there. So and some of them are down at a 1st grade level. If I got those ones up to a 10th grade level, then I should have been teacher of the year too, but I didn't, so I wasn't. And so I just wanted to add that kind of little caveat in there. We're not saying that these places could never do this, but we are saying they could never do this with the way that we have society as it is now. We had early education, we had pre-K, we had whatever tool you think is gonna do it, then maybe, but as Superintendent Swigert said, even with those things, if we have students at Central High School right now that are 7 years behind, it's probably gonna take at least 7 years to even do that if we had this magic wand that fixed all the other things that are happening before they even enter our school. So thank you for that.
All right, anybody else? I did have a question, and I know we're gonna get to the cadence of the reports, but just while I'm thinking about it now, so from a board level, let's just use this right now, that the attendance rate is 81. So next year, whatever the next reporting time is, let's say it's 83. Will we get how that was achieved? Will you say like every 9th grader that had perfect attendance, we bought them a car for their 10th grade, something like that? You know, will we know? And if the score goes down, will we know this is what we tried, that didn't work, and that's why the scores went down?
I know pretty much every school is focusing on improving attendance. I know some have tried to be a little more creative than others. So those are definitely things that we can enter into the discussion about why we are where we are and whether hopefully it's positive, but even if it's not, we can outline some of those things.
So that will be part, it just won't be, from a board level, we just won't get a number, oh, we did better, but we'll kind of get why we did or why we didn't. Is that what you're?
We should be able to add to the number to bring some context to it.
Correct, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll get them in, that'll get them in.
Thank you, Dr. Strasser and Pillar Champions. Next, Gary is going to come up and talk about staff. I know that putting him in the hot seat all kind of by himself today, but he and his team are working on this work.
A little shorter than Dr. Strauss.
We're all shorter than Dr. Strasser.
Good evening, board. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important topic. I do want to address the staff pillar. A couple weeks ago, I think just about all of us were gathered over at Central High School listening to some people talk about some very important things relative to recruitment and retention. And quite honestly, I learned quite a bit from that group of people because they brought up a lot of good points, a lot of valid things, and it certainly gave me pause to think there are things obviously we can do better, and we want to focus on that. Under the recruitment and retention, we're looking at typically the number of applicants to gauge our recruitment efforts. It's important to remember that applications are not just a total number of the applicants that come in, but also we look at the source of the applications. Did they come through referrals? Did they come through advertisements? Did they come through job fairs, et cetera? We also look at our application process. I believe somebody spoke at one of the public forums about the frustration they had with our application process and having to abandon their application. And we need to take a look at how we can improve that to make sure that doesn't happen. We want to focus on completed applications because abandoned applications are not going to be considered qualified applicants for the positions. We want to talk about communication to the applicants. Once they apply, has their application been received? Is it being reviewed? What's the next step in the process, et cetera? And then ultimately, once a position is filled, letting applicants know that the position is filled as well so that they can continue on and continue to hopefully apply for other positions within the district as well. I think that's very important to keep in mind that that application process is touching a lot of people. You can see the number that is from the 22-23 school year of the 5,400. Currently, right now, we are at 4,500 for this current school year. So obviously, we haven't completed the year yet, but that is a good indication that people are very interested in our positions and in our process. We look also then at retention rates. How many people are we holding on to? Typically, the retention rate is the number of retained individuals divided by the initial number of employees times 100. So for example, at the beginning of the school year, let's say we have 100 employees, and at the end of the school year, we have 90 at the end of the school year. We started out with 100, so our retention rate is 90%. The retention rate for the 22-23 school year was 81%. Is that a horrible rate? I'm not going to say it's a horrible rate. No, it's not. Is it the best rate? Is it a fantastic rate? No. So there's room for improvement there. And there are things that we need to look at to what we can do to help retention. There are many keys to retention. One happens to be another one of the pillars, communication, how we communicate with our staff. Also, culture and treatment of our staff and how we are dealing with them. And we want to make sure that we are treating them with respect and acknowledging their successes in the very difficult job that they have. We also then wanted to talk about high quality and diverse staff. And one of the areas that we wanted to focus on were multiple endorsements of teachers in this example. And up on the board, you can see we have listed a variety of numbers of endorsements. So from 1 to 9 endorsements, we have about 438 teachers that have 1 to 9 endorsements. Between 10 and 14, we have 450. 15 to 19 endorsements, we have 51. 20 to 24 endorsements, we have 9, and 25 endorsements, we have 1. And those endorsements demonstrate and show that we have teachers that are dedicated to the teaching profession. They want to educate themselves so they can educate students. And that is just one of those things that we are able to measure through the South Dakota Board of Education, that they are able to provide to us the endorsements that every teacher has. Now that's provided they are reporting those to the state as well. So that's incredibly important. And we certainly hope that teachers are doing that. And if they're not, we need them to, because we are using that as one of our measurements in the pillar as well. Finally, I want to look at respected and empowered. And we're looking at the staff experience survey that was conducted. I think it's very important that a couple of things are recognized here. Our staff are very hardworking. They're very dedicated. They're focused on students. It's important for them to feel respected as well as professionals by administration, by the community, and by their students also. A couple of things that we have to ask is, what can we do better to provide that respect to our staff? What is it that we are maybe not doing that we should be doing? Those surveys can help and lend help to us answering those questions. Also, how do we empower them to succeed? Professional development is an area that will help them. Can we empower them to then, as teachers, help teach each other through that professional development as well? And I think this survey is providing a vehicle for us to know what we can and need to do better. So overall, as I addressed that staff pillar, those are the areas that we wanted to look at. I can tell you, much like Dr. Strasser talked about, were a lot of things we could measure when we first started this process. And I think then that first meeting, I think Bobby was at our group. I know Nicole came by at one point, but we were just all over the board with sticky notes because everybody had the idea hamster running about what can we measure, what can we measure, what can we measure. But we landed on these things because we feel that this is a very good indication relative to the recruitment and retention of staff within the district, providing high quality and diverse staff, and then being able to obviously respect and empower them. So I am able to take any questions.
Oh. Deb, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, I was at the Zoom meeting when the gentleman, or I don't know, yeah, it was on Zoom, when he did talk about the application process and how difficult that was. Have we looked at that? Is it that hard? I mean, is it that ugly?
I don't think it's that ugly, and I'll share a story that actually just today I received an email from an individual, a teacher from another district that was inquiring about their application. They stated that they went out into our system and were applying for a position, and that they experienced some challenge and ended up having to go back and reapply or try it again. And they ended up going back a third time. And they emailed me saying, hey, I really want to apply for your district. I just want to make sure either I'm not doing something incorrect or I'm not submitting this properly or what have you. So I spoke to the recruiter, Camille, and I said, hey, can you look into this applicant and see? It turns out her application was 100% complete. It was in our system, and there was just, I don't know if it was a breakdown relative to how the system was communicating to her that the application had been 100% completed, but it's those things that are a concern. And I'm certainly going to say that Skyward isn't necessarily an HRIS system. It's not necessarily a full 100% applicant tracking system. They may have some challenges on their end that we will have to look into as well. But I think a vast majority, we do not have any challenges or problems with applications. We've got 4,500 that have come in. Our concern is people who abandon whenever they just start the process. Is our process too cumbersome? Is it, do we really need to get 3 references for somebody from the class who's applying for a classified position? Those are the types of things that we need to tighten up and do a better job.
Mrs. Stephenson.
So I'm specifically looking at the retention rate and how that must be very variable from department to department.
Yes.
So the way this works do you delegate like, okay, bus drivers, your retention rate is this, and this is your goal for the year. Teachers, it's this, and who gets that responsibility for that, getting that up? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like,
I think we have an aggregate retention rate for the entire district, but then exactly, we can get down granular to school, we can get down to departments, and all of those we can work our way through. We would work closely with, let's say, for example, if we're looking at each individual school, we would work with the principal to understand, what's going on, what's happening. Obviously, exit interviews are something that were discussed at one point in time. We need to discover why are people leaving. There are many people that leave for very valid reasons. Their spouses taking another job in another state. They are tied to the military base that they're being transferred. Some people are going back home to be with family that is ill and that are elderly, and they want to be there for them to take care of them. So there's a multiple reason. I don't want people to think that everybody's fleeing the district because their hair's on fire because it's a horrible place to work. I don't think that's the case at all. You're going to have some people who you can't make them happy no matter what. And you have to accept that and move on. But our focus really should be that we want to increase our retention rate aggregately as a whole throughout the district, but also those very, very important positions. And that's not to say there aren't any important positions, but obviously bus drivers, the high needs that we're experiencing right now, and really needing to focus. And again, there's a lot of other things that we can do to help that as well.
We also did find out that part of that retention rate, part of that 19% that left, that includes retirees. So, for us we have to keep an open mind with what data we're looking at, and that the data that is being reported is even people who are retiring because they're not being retained, right? So there are so many things, and I do think that taking it down to the department level and the building level is going to be important. And that through that, I want to point out that through that bottom respected and empowered staff survey mean, that is the district mean, but every building got their building mean. So top number there is 5.0. That's the top number. So we're actually, we know there's room for growth. There is definitely room for growth, but anything that is not 3.0 or below, we know we need to move, but this could have been so much worse. Like, this is a mean, gives us a place to go, and each individual building has their information too. Because this is a mean, Michael could give us a lesson on mean, but because it is a mean, there's obviously just buildings that are lower than this. About half.
Right. Mr. Swan.
Thank you, President Carr. I know that the major thing you see when you turn on the TV about September, October, is unfilled positions. And it's one of those things that everybody talks about. Is there going to be a metric for that? Or, even we talked about canceling routes and bus driving, and we talked about our shortage of paras, talk about all of this stuff. Is there going to be a kind of a breakdown so that we can communicate to the community and saying, hey, we're 10 drivers down this school year, rather than focusing on, just the teaching aspect, which is probably one of the more important ones. But if we can't get kids to school, then we have to address we're looking at our attendance rate as well. So
Yeah, we need to be very careful of just focusing on one specific area. It is district-wide into all of the various positions because they all play a very important role. I know that, again, you watch the news, it's very much, it's everywhere. Well, everybody has teaching shortages, everybody has shortages of bus drivers, et cetera. Me personally, as a human resources person, I want to be able to say we can't buy into that theory. We need to take control of our district, and we need to figure out ways to fill all of our openings. And we need to come to a solution that's going to fill those positions in a relatively acceptable manner as far as time frame, because obviously the longer positions stay open, bus drivers being one is a perfect example. You're going to have to cancel routes. That we just have to get past and just move on from using an excuse, so to speak, that there's just a shortage of bus drivers. We need to be proactive and figure out how do we get people to drive bus for the district or any open position for that matter.
Thank you.
All right. No other questions?
Thank you. So if Kelsey and Bobby would like to step up to the podium, I'm gonna actually speak from here, but if you guys want to be available to comment as well. Kelsey, Bobby, and I worked hard on the community pillar. We really felt that looking at the pillar statement, that building collaborative relationships and supporting and improving that educational experience kind of boiled down to these high level metrics that were incredibly valuable. And I showed you earlier everywhere we'd been, right? A lot of places. In the end, we decided, Bobby, do you want to talk about that engagement one?
Yes, so for engagement with district level communication platforms, we looked at different ways. So I pulled lots of different numbers, lots of different metrics off of social media. And the most prevalent one I feel is going to be our followers. So that is people that are seeing our posts regularly and following along with things that we are sharing. And then also our open rate for school messenger. So this is going to be the emails that are sent out district and family wide, and how many people are actually taking the time to open that email and read it versus, I mean, when I pulled these numbers, it was kind of shocking. We are currently blocked by 1,445 emails within the district. And then without duplicates, it's being sent to about 19,000 people. And the rest, the open rate with 34%, a lot of people are just deleting our emails that we are seeing. So we need to figure out ways to better communicate and better engage with our community members.
I think it's important to share that we are hoping that the app will help with that. And the data that we can pull from that. So although we can't report that right now, we have high hopes for that. I would also like Bobby to share about Taco John's today in social media. Can you share?
Oh, yes. So Krista Leichner, our student nutrition manager, has worked really hard to partner with Taco John's. And she emailed me on Friday and asked if I could put it out. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll put it out on Monday. I scheduled it. I completely did not look at my phone or Facebook last night. I checked out and she called me and she's like, have you seen the Facebook post? It's been shared over 1,000 times. It has probably right now over 500 likes or engagement with it, and it has reached over 60,000 people in our community. Just telling people to go to Taco John's on Monday night, March 18th, because 20% of proceeds will be donated to pay off negative school lunch balances in the district.
So I just think that's an example. We know we can get traction with social media. This is a perfect example. In 24 hours, that is the outcome we have had. We have a community that cares. We have a community that does engage. 1,000 shares. I was one of those, by the way, but 1,000 shares. So I think that's pretty powerful. Our next area that we're going to dive into is from the Family Caregiver Survey. And it says, I am proud to say I have a child at this school. This survey has not gone out. It's going to go out closer to the end of April. We will then put the mean of that district-wide, but of course, every single building will get their information. So we can dive down. We did add, part of this is from the Employee Experience Survey. There was a question that said, I would recommend that parents select my organization, Rapid City Area Schools, to serve their child. Our score was 3.72. I feel strongly that this was hard for my heart to see this. Now, is it terrible? No. Do I want to believe that every single employee, this was an employee survey. Do I want to believe that every single employee in our district believes in our organization, I want that. So that is something we are going to target. Like how is it that we make movement on this? The next one is on you guys. So I brought you guys into this, or we brought you into this. So this is board member participation in school and community events. We are using your blue claim sheets. We are tracking this by quarter. So you didn't know this, but now you do. Quarter one, all 7 of you, and that would be June or July 1st to September, the end of September. You had 152 school visits. So then from October to December, 192. Look at you guys go, right? So we believe that you guys have an incredible power when you visit schools and are out in the community and being seen. We all know that you feel strongly that you're the voice of the community. You represent the community. We feel that the community needs to know how invested you are. So we wanted to share that. And then the last one is the number of district volunteers. These are volunteers. This list is cleaned up every single year. So we feel very confident that this is a great baseline number. But we feel that as we grow in proud to have a child in our organization, telling parents that we want their kids to come to our organization, we feel that volunteer number will grow. So right now, our baseline that we're at is 961 vetted volunteers in our district. So those are our areas, our measures of success. We will stand for questions, Bishop Carr.
Ms. Stephenson?
I just have a comment about the district volunteers. I think there might be a gap because of what I've heard from community members between being on the volunteer list and actually volunteering. Which I guess is neither here nor there. It's still a good baseline, but
What do you, I'm not following why you say there's a gap. These are all people who have filled out the volunteer document and gone through the process.
right. And then nothing happens.
Okay.
Like they don't, like they're a community member who wants to volunteer, they get all ready to go, and then they're like, what do I do?
So I'm hearing that we need to follow up when they fill out the document, we need a process of engaging that
Yes,
volunteer.
that is
Okay.
exactly what I'm saying. And as soon as I said it, I was like, well, this might not be the most appropriate. It just came to my mind that I've heard it multiple times, but I do love that as having that number as a measurement of engagement.
Thank you. I put that down because I think we can do something about that.
Mr. Berkland?
I had a comment on the board member participation. I'm not quite sure how to fix this, but more of just something to know is, I personally don't put a lot of things on my blue sheet, so I don't know how you might want to track that. I don't know if we want separate spots, because like when which maybe I should.
Yeah, Walt, what is that? Walt doesn't turn his in, so.
Exactly, so I'm just wondering how we can better collect data there.
Well, I
on
think,
what we're doing.
you know,
or
I
if that
think-
matters.
Well,
That it is accurate for you.
I would love, Shirley's keeping track of this for us because she's your support there. You know, I think the blue sheet is something you turn in. So if you want to turn in things that you don't expect to pay for, then I think you can put them on your blue sheet, but just say, you know, this is, I mean, I think that is the best way for us to collect it from you because it's something you're used to
Mhm.
giving us, except September, Walt. But that's something you're used to giving. So, you know, if we want to put a sticky note on it, you can put those, we can figure out how to do that. I do recognize that you're out in buildings and you don't, we've talked
Right.
about what constitutes something that you put on your claim sheet and it's not a pop in, hello, but, you know, a more substantial visit. We'd still like to know though. We'd still love to know that you're popping in and being seen. I think that's fantastic.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and like, I don't need the
Yeah.
credit for it, but I just
But
want you guys to have the
Well,
accurate data.
you do get the credit for it.
Of,
You
like,
do.
yeah, I went to a basketball game, or I went to a
I-
tennis tournament. Or
I want
went to
that. I
debate or-
want you to get credit for that.
Right, perfect. I will sticky
Yeah.
note it or whatever.
Well, or even, I wonder if the sheets, I don't know if it's easy to modify them.
Okay.
Yeah, cause I mean, I'm in the same boat. There are times where I'm like, I did something, I engaged, but like, I'm not gonna put it for reimbursement.
I think the community needs to know how engaged you are. And this is a really wonderful way to tie you in. We're talking about it growing at the bottom. I want to see you guys too engaging in this, so I'm excited about that. Okay,
All right, thank you.
oops. And Bobby gets to stay, so here we go. I think I don't know if Shane was able to join
Yes.
online, but
Good evening, board. Thank you for having us. So for the communication pillar, Shane Daniel, the IT director, and I are your pillar champions. Shane is currently homesick, so he is joining us via Zoom and he will chime in when he needs to. So for the communication pillar, we're focusing on clear and consistent communication throughout our school district. I can tell you that when we started looking at what we were going to measure for this, Casey definitely had to calm me down because Shane and I sat down and we created a list of every way that one of our groups within the district could communicate or who they can communicate with. For example, we looked at, for staff can communicate with the Board of Education, DDL, managers and principals, parents and community, and internally with other staff. So when we broke it all down, there was a lot of different metrics and different ways we could measure this. We were able to decide that a surveying would probably be our best opportunity to capture this data. And Huron Studer does provide us with lots of amazing surveys that we will be running every year. So we thought instead of creating yet another survey that the district is going to send out, let's use the ones that we'll be consistently using throughout the other pillars as well. So to start, we're going to be using the district services survey, which is the survey that managers and principals filled out about our district direction leaders. We're going to be measuring the accessibility question on that, which had a baseline of 4.33. And then for that same survey, we're going to be measuring accuracy, which we scored at a 4.28. Both of these scores are pretty high, but there's still room to improve on them. And then for the employee experience survey, so this was all employees giving feedback on their managers or principals. We're going to use, I believe, the organizational level information is communicated in a timely manner across the organization. We scored a 3.39 on that in that survey, so we have lots of room to improve. And then the employee experience survey, again, we're going to use, I have a clear understanding of the mission and goals of our organization. We scored a 3.8 for that, or 8.7, so we still, again, have lots of room to improve. And then it's yet to be determined when that parent and caregiver survey is going to be sent out, which April, I believe, again. We went through that survey, Shane and I went through that survey and didn't quite feel that any of the questions would fit with what we wanted to measure. So we asked Huron Studer if we could actually create our own survey question in addition to the ones they already provide, and we were approved. So we will not be able to compare this to all of the other data they're able to collect from other school districts, but we'll be able to use it internally. So we created the question, I believe information from Rapid City Area Schools District Communication Office is clearly communicated in a timely manner. Again, that's going out in April, so we're still waiting to get those results. Do you have any questions?
That it?
That's it. I was quick. I told you I'd be quick, Bishop Carr.
You promised me that.
I
Yes.
did.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. So what does this mean for us now? Well, we're going to get into the cadence. Bishop Carr is really interested in this piece, like when are we going to get information? How is it going to be collected? What's it going to look like? So this is what we have landed on, that we believe, through our work with Casey, we believe that this is a very structured cadence that makes sense internally and reporting to the board and to the community, and is set up in a way that allows us to make adjustments internally as we go through this process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in August or September, we are going to report to you our annual goal setting. So we're going to give you, we will have, if you look at the very top, at the end of the year in June, we're going to report the end of the year report. So in June, you're going to get the end of the year report. So in August and September, we're going to set our goal setting. You've heard some of our pillar champions are ahead of the work, right? They have already determined, like facilities, they're determined what their goal setting is going to be. Then in November and December, internally, leaders at all levels are going to look at progress towards our goals. So in our divisions, in our departments, in our schools, in our PLCs, we're going to be looking at that leadership progress. At that point, we're going to look and see what we're doing right. Do we need to make any adjustments internally? Then 45 days later, we'll collect that. We'll report it to the board in January and February, where we are midway. 45 days later, same thing, leadership internally, progress towards the annual goals at all levels. And then in June, the report out. So we have work internally. We're going to be looking at this more often than we're bringing it to you, because we feel like there's going to be times that we're going to have to make some adjustments. And we feel strongly that we can direct that work and get communication from all levels of our organization.
Absolutely. So I want to give you as a board a little peek into what would leadership be doing on those in-between times, so that you start to see that forecast of specifically, Bishop Carter, one of the questions you asked, are we going to be able to identify what specific actions are making a difference? What are we learning so we can scale that? And if we tested something as an innovation and we're not seeing the movement on that metric, what did we learn and how are we adjusting? Right? And so really that peek around the corner for you as a board is the work that leaders are engaging in on those cycles in between when you see the data as a board on these overall district scorecard metrics. And we've begun that process with the district direction leaders, starting that peek around the corner on our action planning. And so what I've shared with the team is the action plans that we work to develop move us from improvement that feels lucky, right? Like where we look at our data and we see a bright spot, we see an area of growth and we think, wow, that's amazing. What did we change that made a difference there, right? So these action plans really help us get specific about what are we doing in terms of change efforts to move those metrics that you've seen tonight as part of the scorecard pillars, right? So the work that we will continue doing, and we've got our next meeting set in the beginning of April, I believe, to take our next steps there, is to develop a common approach as district direction leaders and pillar champions on that action planning, where we develop specific actions aligned to those scorecard metrics, and we start to establish what that looks like on a 45-day cadence. We'll start then a process of being reliable and accountable to one another. So those internal pause and checks in between when you will receive the report out as a board, leadership are pausing to say, did we do what we said we would do on our action plan? And did it have the impact that we intended? And there's a reflection process that we'll go through to say, if we executed on this action, we did it, but it didn't move the needle. We can't simply say, well, we're just going to try harder next time, right? We're really gonna think about what got in the way. Was our theory of action not correct? Is there a barrier to the work that we need to remove, right? Because that's what we want to do. We kind of want to double down and say, well, let's just try harder. This process really slows us down at strategic points throughout the year to be able to adjust. And that's the work that I'll have the honor of continuing to partner with the team around. And you'll start to see coming forward on future reports, mid-year and end of year, really what we'll call very simply a stoplight process for you. When items are trending towards goal and hitting goal, you'll see that elevated for you as greens. Yellow will be an indication of things are in progress, but not moving at the level to which we anticipated. And red will be those indications of we weren't starting, we didn't move the needle. And then exactly to some of those questions you asked, elevating some of that learning of what is causing that underneath and how is the team adjusting.
So this goes all the way down, remember, to the school level. So we started this work just last month with the employee experience surveys. And we have now tasked our principals and our leadership teams at the buildings to come up with action steps that are going to impact those survey questions you saw on our scorecards. Action at the building level. So they are working on developing those action steps now. And then they also got to pick out a building level action that they're going to do. That's the type of things that we'll be looking at. Did the action step that West Middle School developed, did it move? Is it moving? Do they think it's moving them forward? Those things are very, very important. And that is, we're really trying to tie it in, I believe, for the first time in my career in Rapid City Area School, all the way to the classroom, all the way to the individual teacher. So they see and live the strategic plan in their work, in their building, with their professional development, all of that. It's living there instead of just being a data point that we report on to the board. Okay, so here is the work, and you can see, as I think really we've talked about that arrow going both ways. I think tonight fully illustrated it maybe for the very first time of how it goes truly both ways. And it is in this scorecard work that we have spent a significant amount of time. I know that it looks simplistic. I can't tell you the number of conversations and meetings we have had getting it to this point. And it's a point that we are really, really happy with. We didn't want to bring you a product that we didn't think that we could make movement on. So thank you board for giving us the time to do this work the right way. It takes immense skill for you to have the hard conversations with me, Bishop Carr, and push this, ask the hard questions, but allow us to do the time to do it right so that we don't have to go back to it. And I know I've talked to you about other districts work in this, and I've talked to superintendents, and what I have heard is when they rush the scorecard development, they have to redo it. When they rush it and they put the wrong metrics on their scorecards, they had to scrap it and go back to it. I believe that we did it in a way that we will not have to scrap it. I believe that we did it very strategically to connect to our plan and to connect at all levels of our district. And I'm really excited to move this work forward. And that is the end of our presentation.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now open it up for board member questions. When we talk about, I've had this concept of board members going upstairs, but when we talk about this plan, and I know it's purposeful for you to want the bulk of the work to be done at the even classroom and building level. But at what point does the board have its mark on the strategic plan in a way that, let's say, Mrs. Strong explained very well, because I was gonna say exactly what Ms. Stephenson said about not having a graduation rate metric. So what if the board strongly feel that for whatever reason, we want to see that metric? So at what point do we have a voice to affect the strategic plan?
So you're always going to be the experts internally as in terms of what you need as a board, as your district leadership team. My job as your leadership coach is to caution you on how many metrics you include. So, right, my job is to kind of help you see where others have gotten stuck in this process. Nicole gave you a great peek around the corner of thinking really intentionally about what shows up on the district level. And so that'll be a conversation I think it might be valuable to have, but to really think about too many metrics on the scorecard will become challenging to create the effort and the energy and that line of sight. And also thinking about your level of governance, right? Of what you want to see to understand success towards those pieces, the pillars and the pieces related to the priorities set by the community.
I would also say that no matter what is on our scorecard, our graduation report is on a report card. The state report card, that is going to show every single year. That report card report about that comes out of the Teaching, Learning, and Innovation Office every single year. We worked in a lot of ways to not be repetitive of that, so that we know we're going to get that. We're hoping that the areas that we are measuring are going to impact that report that is available statewide, because that data is reported. I would also say that when you track graduation rate, you're tracking students that are gone. Because by the time we get that number, they're gone. It is a valuable number for a public education institute. It is very valuable, and it is something we need to be working toward. Our scorecard metrics give us a way to get there, but we are measuring students. That rate is graduation rate, the students who have left us successfully. It's not reporting, unless you want to subtract, it's not reporting the dropout rate, right? So we're not avoiding that conversation. I think it's really important that the board recognize that. It is being reported. It is just not one of the metrics that we're choosing to measure at this point. Now, obviously you're the board. If you want us to include it, we absolutely can. But it is including something that is end game. And we worked, I think Dr. Strasser's team worked really hard to report metrics that are getting us to the end.
Okay, let me try this again. I just used that metric as an example.
Okay.
What it feels like is like, and I know part of it is purposeful, that the work is being pushed down and that the board is just getting reported on what you're doing. So my question is, where does the board jump in the process of, well, we've got an idea that we think is.
Well, I mean, we always want to hear your ideas. We actually, all of us enjoy you all very much. So you can always report your ideas to us. I think that a lot of the places you get to jump in is when we bring curriculum to you in the meetings, in the facility committee meetings, when we bring the projects forward for you to approve the budget on the facility things that we've developed. That is really where the board gets the say. I mean, if we bring something to you and you are absolutely not in favor of it, you're gonna slam us down complete stop. Like,
Okay.
this is not happening. That is your absolute role.
Yeah, I just want,
Yeah,
you know, I don't
yeah.
want to get in the way, but I mean, I
Yeah.
do want to have to say, I don't
Yeah.
naturally see it in this grafting. So, all right, Mr. Swan.
Thank you, President Carr. I guess I'm, in regards to the question, I'm not too concerned about what our mark is, you know what I mean? I would like to see it, the mark of all of our employees, that this is a village that we're just happy to be a part of. Not one of us here possesses the knowledge or the skills that are out in our schools or in our district offices. We don't, collectively, we don't. And I would hate to put our 8 resumes up against everybody else's. I would like that decision is where it's at right now. I applaud the work that's going on. I want to see what our teachers see as important that they're working every single day at their jobs. That they can say, I've got a say in this. I want to make this better. And I love being a board member because I can hear all the success stories. I can see what's going on in the planning and, I enjoy watching our new hires, people that are new to our district that come forth and have accepted leadership roles here and have created something that's how we used to be, how we can lead the state, how we can lead a lot of in the region. I'm happy to I'm just happy to be seated on the board that's in a district that's moving, and you can feel the momentum coming. You can see it on the surveys. I think that's where we stand, is that we say, yeah, let's get out of the way. You know what I mean? Cause we want to stand in the way and say, well, I want credit for this. Not that's isn't what President Carr had said, but hey, man, let's let the people go to work. You know what I mean? So that they have a buy-in to our district, that our kids have a buy-in to this district, and that we can create something great for all of us. Thank you. That's all I got.
Ms. Stephenson.
I just wanted to follow up on President Carr's thoughts about board input. I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying, we've heard the board's concerns. They're embedded into this, and we can still get the data that we want, like if we've identified that will still be reported to us, we can still hold the district, or like hold that as like an ultimate goal, is we want an improved high school graduation rate. We don't want this gap between our highest achieving students and our lowest achieving students. Is there room for a future board in this plan to say, actually, what we're hearing from the community right now is this and this as being something that we want to make better? Is there room to or have you had boards kind of had that experience where they're
I believe that for as long as this plan lives in Rapid City, this strategic plan, there is always going to be the opportunity for the district leaders, the principals, the board to come back to the scorecard work and say, hey, is this really reporting what we want? And maybe a year from now, Corey and his team will come forward and say, in hindsight, we want to include the graduation rate, or how are we going to be reflective of seniors in that student pillar? And maybe, one of the things we could look at is the NCRC, what was the NCRC test that seniors take? That might be something we want to include, which is indicative of senior success. So I think it can always, it's a living, that's what's super important. It's a living document, and we will make adjustments as needed. Of course, we'll bring those to the board.
Ms. Brooklyn.
I have a semi-related question. So kind of what I'm hearing is like a lot of the things that we have talked about are in there. This is just what we're measuring. We're focusing on these 4. So my question is, for example, like how do the pillars interplay here? So for example, I would guess on the student survey, one of the things I heard a lot was They wanted, my students wanted staff members who represented them. They wanted more Native representation in their staff. So if that's something that we get from the student survey, that would kind of fall under staff, but would that be under students? Like how do those interplay together? Or like facilities, probably the staff survey probably says they want good facilities. How do those kind of interplay together?
Well, the employee survey did talk about a lot of things that show up in different pillars. That cross, I mean, I like that. I really appreciate, Michael, that you said interplay. How do they connect? We saw some of it really clearly, I think, in the communication and the community, those two scorecards. That's why Bobby's on both teams. There is a lot of interplay in those two scorecards. Maybe we need to look at see how the facility interplays with the students, and the teachers, how the staff interplays with those other things. I will say that in the staff survey, that communication piece shows up also in that. Give me some time and I can try to draw some direct, lines and show how those are cross measuring. But I think it's a great point, Michael. Thank you.
Superintendent Swaggart, could I add a level of just what
Please.
we've seen in other organizations that really commit to particularly using experience surveys as they cross students, families and caregivers, and employees. For example, this employee experience survey that your team is actioning around right now had 20 questions on it. Your teams are not asking what would better look like on each of those 20 questions, right? There are very specific areas aligned to your scorecard pillars that we're digging into. And then each individual building or department has one that they can select that is an opportunity for them, right? One of their other lower scores. Here's what we see across the country, and I think this gets to your point of interplay, right? When we do that survey rollout process well, so that means when we go and talk to staff and say, we need to know more, what would better look like? What should we consider as an action step? And we determine that, and we communicate it with them, and we align to it, and we do a pulse check survey item, right? You told us this would make a difference. Here's where you saw evidence of our action. Halfway through the year, we do another little pulse check on that. What we see is all of the experiences start to lift, right? So as you start to work on addressing facilities, and we're hearing that come up in the student survey, and you as leaders at the board level, at the district level, at the building level, you help folks make those connections. And it's 1,000 conversations of helping people see everything connected, like that flywheel gets moving and you'll see lift in multiple areas. Did that help?
Yes, and I think part of it that I need to wrap my mind around is pillar champions are they don't only exist in their pillar. Like hiring someone could show up under students, even though that feels like it should be in staff. And I think that's part of what I had to wrap my mind around there. So thank you.
All right, is that it?
That's all I got.
Ms. Thomas?
Walt, I absolutely 110% agree with your comments. When we got to the students part, because this board, what we do is say, okay, district, all of you experts, come up with a strategic plan. And that was about a year ago, year and a half. When did you think we could do it in about a day? Right? Took a little bit, but the work that has gone into this, it was very good, strategic of you to say, no, let's really think through this so that we can come up with something that down in the classroom people can get on board with. And I saw it. So I was on the steering committee, and that feels like about a year ago, but with the students, I remember the amount of diverse people that were in there from all different parts of this community coming together to get a statement for each pillar. That was a lot of work. That was 3-4 meetings of some intense, well-managed, by the way, thank you, to keep us focused on what we needed to then send out to each of your groups, your pillar champions, to come up with what metrics are they actually asking in that statement that we have to come up with? What are they actually saying in this statement about students being we being welcome and acknowledge all students for their value, et cetera. And then down in here, your baseline. So, you know, coming up with the measures of success, I don't think, there's no way we could have done that. Like you said, we are, even collectively, we are not the district experts. So to see what you came up with for the measures of success, those are achievable. They're not just, but I love this baseline too. So already we have for the ACTs to try to get that up by 0.5%, 1%. You're already having said that this next year or this year, I can't remember, next year, maybe 9th and 10th graders will be doing the practice. That's phenomenal because they need that practice. So then they're not as scared to take it in the 11th grade when they really need it, or the 12th grade. They get that practice. That hasn't been something that we've told students that they need to do, but they don't know that it's really helpful. That actually might work. So you've already got metrics and that, you know, in a year, we could see if that score goes up because of that particular thing. This is beyond, to see this go, whoa, wait a second. Now I see how this is working. This is a fantastic program, or whatever you call this, plan on how to get a good strategic plan. And I'm just really thankful for all of your work. And this is fantastic. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Baker.
Well, Kate just got in my head a little bit because I can say a lot of that. There was 3 of us that was on that steering committee, and I am blown away by where we are now compared to where we were then. Because I'm with Kate and all those little sticky notes, I'm going, what the heck? This is not gonna work. What the piece I like is the accountability piece. I love that there's a scorecard. I like that that's where the board comes in, because if they're not performing, if that scorecard shows that, this isn't working, then I think then we can have more input in that. But I say I'm with him. We just step back and let you guys do your jobs. And I think you've done an amazing job. Every one of you guys, I think, have done a really good job on this. So kudos to you and to you and to you. So. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you. That was a great presentation, so I'm looking forward to it. All right, at this point in the agenda, we've got others. Does anybody have an other? Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session SDCL 1-25-2.1, SDCL 1-25- 2.3 and SDCL 1-25-2.4.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, we are now officially in executive session. The board